Welcome back to another webinar with Rabbi Pinchas Winston. This webinar is sponsored by the Miriam Project Geula Hour and Yehuda Shamroth, also the Bring Them Home organization, and Israel 365. We are looking forward to a very interesting webinar. I don't have all the information in front of me, so I'll let the rabbi introduce himself.
Okay, it was 2 weeks since we actually continued, and I did not put a bookmark there, so I'm not exactly sure where we are. So just going to pick up where it kind of makes sense, logical to do so. And at the main point, we're talking about what we call Geula and Mashiach. Okay, the whole premise, the starting point of this discussion was the fact that the Gemara itself talks about the one of the Simanim. I got people asking me, if all this is a sign that Geula is imminent, the amount of falsehood, the amount of confusion that exists in the world today, and the things that are being said, and as one person put it not too long ago, actually about a couple of decades ago, even back then, that you could say anything you want today until someone punches you in the teeth, because that's the way it goes. I mean, it's like the integrity. You have to understand the basis of this, and this is what people don't really follow or understand and realize why it is the way things go. The starting point is that you have to have some kind of absolute truth in creation in order for people to live by it. If you don't have an absolute truth, then everything becomes an opinion. And it could be an informed opinion, uninformed opinion. For the most part, that the world has almost 8 billion people in it right now, and as educated as people are, that they're not as educated as they need to be to have an informed opinion about the most important issues in life, and people lack foresight and they lack the wisdom. It's because a big jumble of ideas. As I may have mentioned in the past, the Zohar points out that if you take Balak, the name Balak in the Chumash, a few parshas ago, he was the one who was the king of Moab, who hired Bilam, a hired hand or hired a contract on the Jewish people to curse them, to stop them from coming into Israel. The far-reaching implications unto this very day, what they did at that time. But the Zohar says that they were rooted in Amalek. Amalek was a people in Parshas Bashalach who attacked the Jewish people. They have a special status in history, not a good one, a very negative one, that God declared war against them until the end of time. The gematria, the numerical value of the letters of Amalek, Ayin, Mem, Lam, and Kuf, is also equal to the Hebrew word suffix, which means doubt, because Amalek specifically creates a doubt in divine providence, creates doubt in the reality of God, creates doubt that what we do makes a difference in life. So all to the end of being able to do whatever you want, whenever you want to do it. And that's really what the big machlokus is today. The argument, the disagreement, the fighting going on between the two main sides, if you want to call it, in Israel today and around the world. I mean, this is what people are fighting for. It's not so much ideology at this point. At least on one side, it's not. Maybe on the right, the side that still believes in God, still believes in morality, still believes in an absolute truth that God communicated to mankind, and that we're here to try to avoid doing immoral things and try and live with a moral life based upon the absolute truth, that there's an ideology involved. But from the other side, the left side, which is interesting because left usually has a very negative connotation. People tend to be very proud of being on the left, despite its negative connotation. It represents a more liberal approach to life. The Kabbalah explains that the snake that tempted Chava in the Garden of Eden to actually eat from the forbidden fruit, and then Adam after that, was in the shape of what we call a nun sofit. A nun sofit is like a stick. It looks like a long stick, right? You have the nun inside the world, which is like bent over, and then you have a nun sofit, which means like an end nun that comes at the end of the word, and rather than have the one that bends, it's straight down long. And in Kabbalah, God used the letters of the Aleph base to make the world, and each letter has its own story, its own meaning, its own properties, spiritually speaking, and some of them are more geared towards what we would call din, judgment, or the constriction of God's light that leads to all the evil in creation and all the harsh judgment that mankind might suffer at times in history. So the snake was in the shape of a lamed. That's what a snake looks like. In those days, he actually stood up. Right. Today, he goes in its belly. Right. But that's part of the punishment for being involved in the sin of the tree of knowledge with evil. And in the beginning, it stood up and looked like a nun. So it says that the Sitra Achra, which people translate as the Satan, which is true, and the word Satan itself just means like Satan. The English word Satan comes from the Hebrew word Satan. Satan in Hebrew just means obstruction, because the Satan was an angel that comes to obstruct us from doing what we're supposed to do, to serve God, to come close to God. So he obstructs us. He puts roadblocks in our way. And he does that by creating intellectual confusion and tempting us with things that are hard to resist, that we might instinctually be drawn towards. And he went into the Nachash. He is like possessed. We call it a dibuk. A dibuk in Kabbalah is a body that's been possessed by a wandering soul. These ideas, they sound very Christian, but they came from Judaism. At least the origins of these ideas, they go back a long time before Christianity. And they learned Kabbalah. They learned these things, and they talked about these things, and they mimicked these things. And so the same thing is that the Sitra Achra, in order to tempt Chava, went into the snake. It's a long story, obviously requires some explanation. Took it over, not physically but spiritually. And once the snake began to tempt Chava to get her to believe that she could in fact go against the word of God for her benefit, that was no longer the snake anymore. That was the Sitra Achra talking. And the reason why is because the snake was what Kabbalah calls muchan. It was set aside. It was prepared for this particular thing. The mean found its mean. This is a concept that the thing fights, just like people will be attracted to one another because they share purposes, they share goals, they share outlooks and perspectives. A mean will find its mean. A kind will find its kind and associate with it. So therefore, the Sitra Achra, which came from the side of judgment and constriction of God's life, went towards a snake which had a similar property, and therefore it could use it as its vehicle to talk on its behalf and convince Chava to eat. Now, if Chava knew or understood that was the Sitra Achra talking to, then, excuse me, I don't want to talk to you at all. Leave me alone. You're only here to cause trouble. But because it was disguised in the snake, she thought that she was talking to the snake. And in those days, the snake was not like the snake today. The Gemara says the snake was meant to be like a mashamash. He was serving. He was there to serve. He could talk and stand, had legs and all that. Hard to believe, but that's what it says. And it was there to serve Adam and Chava. So it was like talking to one of your servants in the house. That's why she was able to fall and make the mistake in the end. And that's a concept that's all through Kabbalah. That just like, for example, we put on clothing to cover up our bodies, but our bodies cover up our souls, and we can't always see on the outside what's going on the inside. Likewise, different souls will come back in history, or different energies will occupy those people or those things that are like it, and the kind will find its kind. So traditionally, right, the Sitra Achra, which means the other side, right, usually comes on the left side. And the concept of the left, from a Kabbalistic point of view, is the concept of judgment and constriction of light. It's not a coincidence at all. You rarely will find very liberal people who believe in God or practice religion or emphasize morality. They're usually the ones who are trying to make life more open and available to do whatever you feel like doing, whatever seems natural in the end. That's why people, and this is a very harsh statement, but I've read this several times in many different sources that will tell you that fascism tends to emerge from leftism. It's not coincidence. It sounds very harsh. It's, well, how could that be? I know people are left. No, there's a reason why. Because you take God out of the picture. You take absolute morality out of the picture. What are you left with? You're left with human opinions. And human opinions are fickle. This is one of the reasons why, by the way, it says by Mount Sinai, that God held the mountain, Mount Sinai, above the Jewish people, either figuratively or literally, and said, if you accept the Torah, great. If not, this is where the mountain is going to land right on top of you, and this is your burial place. So the classic question they ask, and there's different answers, as to why God had to do that. The Jewish people had already said Nasa v'nishma, had already accepted the Torah, and by saying, we will do and we will understand. So why did God come back and say, Here's the mountain. And this is going to be it if you don't say yes. So the Maharal explains because God was making a point. He gave them the choice, and they answered yes. But God was telling them there was no no. You have to understand it. I let you say yes, and you're going to be rewarded as if there was a no. But think about it for a second. If you say no to Torah, it's not like someone says, "You want to have chicken for dinner?" No, thank you. Oh, well, the world's not going to blow up. The end of days will not come because you chose not to have chicken tonight. There are many decisions you make in life, even if personally that might be catastrophic. They're not going to be catastrophic for the world. But this one would have been. Because as Reish Lakish points out in the same Gemara over there, that God made a condition with creation and said the Jewish people accept Torah on the 6th day of Sivan 2048, and the world has permission to continue and go on. But if not, it's going to go back to null and void. And that's the end of creation. It's the end of history. It's the end of mankind. So God, people are fickle. They will do anything on a whim sometimes. And so God's saying to the Jewish people, if I let the acceptance and the living of Torah be based upon your free choice, today you say yes and tomorrow you say no. You missed the bus and you're angry at God. I'll show God. I'm not going to do this mitzvah tomorrow or today. God says the world can't survive like that. I'm not going to let the world hang on the choices of human beings that can be up and down, left and right, and you name it. We're always, changing or uninformed or mistaken and all that. So therefore, we said yes, and God gave us a choice, but he's also saying, but the world needs Torah. So therefore, you have to accept it. You have to understand that. So don't think, well, I changed my mind. Now I'm going to get out of it in the end. No, you can't backtrack because the world needs it. And so it's not a punishment. It's a schus to be able to hold the world up, to be able to be given Torah and to learn it and to live by it and to perform the mitzvahs. It's just all for your good. God doesn't need the world. So what? So the world blows up and it's gone. So is God losing out on it? No, he loses nothing, not even entertainment value. He's independent of all of it. We don't understand even what he is and how he exists. It's for us. Everything is the whole thing, every last part of it. You think it makes a difference? The Medrash asked the question whether you shecht an animal, you cut the windpipe like this, is it like that? Or whether you chazer. No, it doesn't matter to God for himself. It matters for us. But he said so. Once he says it, you have to live by the law. You can't change it. You can't say, well, if you don't care, why should I care? Well, he does care. He cares for us. Just like a father, cares for their child. And a father will be strict on the child, not for the father's sake, but for the child's sake, because he loves the child so much. So everything that we do in this world that's a part of Torah is keeping the world alive. We're gonna find out, and it's gonna sound arrogant, and it's kind of like a chutzpah until you find out this is in fact the reality. That there's all the people living in the world today, this huge, massive planet, in whose merit are we still here? History is still that God has not lowered the boom and brought another major catastrophe to wipe out most of mankind or all of mankind. In whose merit? Well, it could be a handful of people. A handful of righteous people living by mitzvahs and being self-sacrificing for truth and being honest and how about kids? Anyhow, we know these are really the ideal traits to have in life. Humility, the Gemara says, is nothing better than humility. Humility is the essence because you need humility to be truthful. If you have arrogance, you're going to be biased. You can think you're being truthful, but humility is the basis of all other good traits. And everyone knows that being humble, they don't want to be humble necessarily. They don't find it beneficial to be humble. They're scared to be humble, but you can't deny the fact that it is a fantastic thing to be. And all these positive moral traits. But, as I mentioned before in the past, you need three things to have free will, to make choices. One, you have to believe in God. If you don't believe in God, there's no absolute truth. We're back to opinions all over again. You're not doing what might be honestly, ultimately truthful. Second of all, you have to believe that God communicated that truth. It's one thing to believe that God has the truth, but to share it is another thing. And the third thing, maybe is one of the most important of all, is to believe that your Yetzer Hara is a part of you that's not you. It's even your own instinct is not you. You need instinct to survive. If you want to call Yetzer Hara instinct, fine. You need instinct to survive, to protect yourself. Otherwise, God forbid, a person can kill themselves without even intending to because they're not taking care of themselves. But you also have to know when instinct is too much, when it's over the top, when it's being too careful, it's being too selfish. Unlike animals, we can do things like share our food. with other people who are hungry. We can give charity, we can give tzedakah. Animals don't do that. They only do what they're programmed to do. They'll take care of what they have to take care of. And some days they even eat their own young. They don't have that sense of morality, of chesed, of being able to go beyond their instinct. Animals are completely instinctual. They might have unusual and interesting instincts, but they're all instinctual. We're also instinctual, but we have the capacity to rise above instinct. But only if you believe that you need to, only if you believe that it's possible, only if you believe that's what has to happen. If you don't believe that has to happen, so then you get what we have today. So the Zohar says that Balak and Bilam, they're Mushosh and Amalek, meaning there's a koyach. Amalek was a people, but they were like the kli, just like the snake became the vessel for the Sitra Achra to fool Chava. Likewise, the people of Amalek were a kli, they were a vessel for this energy that comes in Shemayim of Amalek. And what is that energy? So the Zohar says you put the names together and you get two words. You get Amalek, right? Bavel, you get Balak and Bilam. Take all the letters, mix them together, and you can spell two words. Amalek is one of them, showing you that Amalek is the root of who they were. And the second is Bavel, and Bavel in Hebrew is Babylonia, because the word Bavel, the Babel, means to confound it. The Mabul, which is the flood of Noah's time, is called the Mabul from the word Bavel, the Babel, because it says that God mixed it around like it's shown. The water, things were put up and down and up and down. So the Bavel represents the concept of intellectual confusion, just like Amalek itself. And when you have that, then basically you're going to have Olam HaSheker. You have a world of Sheker. And fixing it, once you get to that point, we've been sliding towards it. Now, World War II woke the world up, just like World War I woke the world up, because there's nothing like life and death happening all over the place, all around you, and the fear of it, to wake a person up to the things that count most in life, which is life itself. And it tends to make people more conservative and therefore more God-oriented. But then as time goes on, we move away from that, we start to forget about it. Even though people still die, but dying naturally. There's no major, catastrophic, like coronavirus, for example, was also a wake-up call. A lot of people became more conservative once again for a period of time, but now we're going right back again. So that's what creates Olam HaSheker, because it's the main reason why that there are people in life who purposely go around lying, pathological liars, but that's not most people. Most of the people today who are arguing both points of view really believe in their point of view. The only question is, what's the basis of it? How do you come to that? So one is based upon a tradition, one's based upon knowledge, one's based upon the Torah, one's based upon a tradition. Okay, you have a problem with that, so fine, check it out, go take a look, like many people have done, who say, I don't accept that. And they checked it out, they found out why it's still valid to this very day. They changed their life according to it, whether they want to or not. But if you're not going to check it out, then you're just perpetuating Olam HaSheker. You're saying, I choose to live in the lie. I mean, I like to believe it's the truth, but I can be as secular as I want to be, that I can do whatever I want. I can define right and wrong on behalf of all of mankind. That's what Hitler said. I mean, people are shocked to find out. I had a discussion with somebody once, and it put things in perspective for them when he was arguing there's no right or wrong. There's no absolute truth. So I just said you have to understand the implications of that. That's exactly what Hitler also said. So do you find Hitler good or evil? Well, it was very hard for him to say, neither. He had to I could see he struggled with the word evil, because there's an implication involved with evil. But eventually he was forced to answer and say, yeah, I guess you could say he's evil. How can you say he's evil? Against what? What are you comparing his opinion to? It was an opinion. His opinion was that the Jews had to go. And your opinion is that you're Jewish. You don't want him to. He was more worried about secular Jews than he was religious Jews, because secular Jews assimilate. They marry Germans. They get involved in German society. Haredim, were like on the side. And he wanted to kill all just in case they became secular. But for the most part, it was the secular Jews that concerned the most. So his opinion was there to go. He said, no matter where they are, it doesn't make a difference whether they're religious or not, he said. A Jew is born a Jew. He will come up with something that goes against survival of the fittest. So therefore, he had to kill every last Jew, wherever they were. You agree with that? No, of course not. Do you think it's evil to do a thing like that? Yes. How can you say that? All you can say, the moment you remove absolute truth, the moment you say that there's no God, there's no absolute truth, that we don't know what it is, we can't live by it, there's no Yitzhak, the moment you say all that, all you can say is, he had his opinion, I have my opinion, and I disagree. I don't like, just like he doesn't like my opinion, I don't like his opinion. But that's like reducing the Holocaust to just a matter of opinions. It's like very harsh. If a person could do that, they have to really check themselves out. That's all part of Olam HaSheker. And that's the reason why, as we go closer to towards the end, that it becomes more of an Olam HaSheker, because, as to be expected, everything gets, works towards this ultimate conclusion. The further you go, people took God out of the classrooms, they took God out of public places, and they're thinking they're doing mankind a favor. They're the exact opposite. They're just acting as a vehicle, as a vessel for the Sitra Achra. That's all that's going on. Sitra Achra working through them. They might smile nicely. They might be in politics, non-politics. But at the end of the day, if you're going to do anything whatsoever to reduce the awareness of God in the world, in society, you are acting by definition as a vehicle for the Sitra Achra, for Amalek in history. Now, I don't want to be that. You might say, well, yeah, that's fine. But if a car's a car, a car can say, I don't want to be a car. Ignore the fact that I have 4 tires and an engine and a chassis, that the only thing I really can do well is drive, right? I want to be a door or a swimming pool. The swimming pool is like much more fun on a hot day. The swimming pool has water, it's walls. No, your car. So a person could say, I don't want to be a vehicle for evil, but you make yourself into one. The moment that you take God out of your life, out of the world, whether you like, it's the mechanics. It's the way the world is wired. I can't emphasize that enough. Anyhow, so that's why there's no easy or natural solution to Olam HaSheker, especially if people don't believe it is one, or worse, care that it is, which is a huge amount of people today in the world. When the individual matters more to the individual than society as a whole, life becomes only about survival and taking advantage of others. Fixing the world is only important to the people who believe truth exists and needs to prevail, because you're looking at truth and it's like a foil for life. It's telling you this is what it should look like, and you're living with what it does look like. So it's very hard to get up in the morning and go about your business and ignore the fact that it's not changing for the better. This is the difference between Abraham and Noah, we're told. But Abraham walked before God. Noah only walked with God. Noah was a tzaddik, clear through and through. But Abraham, not only was he a tzaddik, a righteous person, but he went around fixing the world. He couldn't live with this fact that people were so often far from the truth. So therefore, he took it upon himself. He sacrificed his life, but that was his pleasure. That was his meaning in life. That was his fulfillment to do this. And Noah had to be told to do, which is why we're told that he had to take care of the animals for a whole year on the ark, which was not a good job. Not high on the list of jobs to get in your lifetime, because it was painstaking work all the time. Even got bit by the lion once, and because he didn't take care of the world while he had a chance to, so therefore he was forced to take care of the world on the boat, for the year on the ark. So it's like sailing on an ocean you don't recognize in a ship you don't know without a map. All you can do is your best to survive whatever life and the sea throw at you. You have no destination to look forward to, since you don't know where you're going. Life becomes only what you make of it on the ship. In other words, if you don't believe in any ultimate purpose, and you don't believe in any real destination for mankind, because you don't have anything to tell you what it is, all we focus on, it's an amazing thing. I mean, it's very fast. I got that. It's very fascinating. I can enjoy it. I can enjoy it because I do believe there's a purpose for mankind. I do believe there's a timeline for history, and I do believe that God runs the world. So I can afford to look at the science and the physics and say, "Oh, it's interesting." I learn a lot from it. It's all part of God's creation. But for people who don't, you're left with, well, history comes down to the fact that maybe the universe is expanding, maybe it's not expanding. Well, now there's evidence that it's not, which makes a problem for the Big Bang theorists. But assuming, let's say, for the time being, that most of the universe is dark energy and it's just going to blow up at some point in time, or it's going to collapse, and it's like all these theories, destructive theories that basically say, at the end of the day, life is meaningless. Nothing is really happening that's important. And, eat, drink, and be merry, because who knows what tomorrow's going to bring? And that becomes life for so many people. That's one of the reasons why it has been pointed out by so many people who have had to experience it and go out there and witness it. But so many people fighting today in Eretz Israel on the left against the reforms and all that. Shocking as it is to the rest of for the people who know the truth. We're not just fighting for some cause that they happen to take up that's meaningful to them. A lot of these people had nothing going for them. There's nothing else going on. This is a cause that made them feel important and real, even though they're misinformed about what they're doing and what they're fighting against. And they go out there and cause all kinds of havoc and trouble and distress and billions of shekels and damage as innocent people, and even danger to life at the same time, because they don't have meaning in life. This becomes their meaning. People who have a direction don't have to do these things. And if they do these things, it's only if they know for sure this is a good cause. So that's why God gave us the Torah. Not only is it the map, but it explains the ship. Physicists are great at analyzing what catches their attention and theorizing about what it is and why it works the way it does. There it is. But would you hire a doctor to operate on you who's still in the experimental stage? Right? You're going to rely upon, hi, this is my first operation, triple bypass, or even just fixing a trick knee, right? The first you don't want to know that, the first operation, because you need to get experience. So scientists are brilliant. I mean, the theories, my hat goes off to them. I'm not wearing one right now. My hat goes, but it's like, I'm absolutely awed by how brilliant man can be, how clever they can be to look at something and so far away in the universe. Now, a lot of it's theory, a lot of it's based upon conjecture. Science, as they say, even scientists, is best guess for the reality, and that's why it's constantly changing. But even with all the mistakes and all the guessing, that it's just still amazing the equations they come up with and the theories they come up with and the observations they come up with and the satellites they build to go look at the edge of the universe and go back. I love it. It's mind-boggling. But still, do you want to rely upon these people to tell you what life is about? But that's what people do. So, or upon scientists and politicians who keep revising their conclusions to either match or distort reality to steer mankind through history. Besides, there's one very important point that everyone seems to ignore. The physical world is the way it is because of the spiritual world. That's what we're told. I mean, this is constantly a mashal that it's the same thing. For example, a child born from a parent is going to exhibit traits of the parent, not just because they grew up in the same house, but sometimes it's genetics. It is from being affected, but nonetheless, they're an offshoot. Children are derivatives of their parents, and the same is true of the physical world. The physical world came from the spiritual world, yesh ma'ayin, ex nihilo, something from nothing. And the something is the world that we live in, and the nothing is not nothing, but actually the spiritual realm, which is called nothing, because compared to the spiritual, it's like it's nothing, but it's everything in the end. That's the origin. That's God, giving light to the lower worlds so they can exist and function. So whatever is going on in the physical world, by definition, has to be rooted in the spiritual world. If it's not rooted in the spiritual world, it can't exist in the physical world. Same thing like a tree, right? Whatever the tree becomes, it's amazing. A small little seed produces a whole tree. Massive. How do you get that huge tree inside that seed? And why didn't it pop earlier? Well, I mean, it doesn't work that way. It's got cells that divide and divide again and keep dividing until it produces leaves and a branch and trunk and the whole thing. But whatever the tree becomes, it can't be anything more than the potential that was already in the seed. As invisible and as microscopic as it might have been, the tree is not going, and human beings too, for that matter. Without genetic engineering, you are going to be the product of your genes that you got from your parents. So, and just because people can't see how this is true or believe that it doesn't change the reality, which is why mankind keeps crouching all over the place. You know what the real problem is? God. He's just too patient, too mysterious. The Gemara says the following thing. The school of Rabbi Yishmael taught, who is like you, God, among the gods? Elim. The word is Elim. Gemara makes an interesting drush, elucidates this word in a very fascinating way. And this, again, goes back to Talmud, goes back to 500 CE. It's like 1,500 years ago, at least. And this is long before the situation today. And it says, who is like you among the mute? The Gemara likes to do this. Ilmim, right? It darshens out the word. The verse doesn't say that, but the concept is there, and they use a verse like this that kind of is similar to make their point. What do they mean by this? So the verse says Elim, which means gods, but the word in Hebrew is easily transformed because in Hebrew you only have the consonants. The vowels can be a vav can be a stick, but for the most part they're dots. That's why the word perot, right, which is pei, resh, vav, tav, those are the other letters. Perot are fruits in Hebrew, can easily be read as the word fruit. Pei, resh, vav, tav. Don't have to change anything. Just look at the letters, read as fruit, perot, exact same letters. The only difference is the nikudot, the vowels, the dots that tell you how to pronounce each of the letters. You have that in Hebrew. So the word Elim, which be read as gods, that's what the verse really means on a pshat level. But the word Ilmim, which means mute, all right, amongst the mutes, to allude to God's strength to put up with the greatest offenses without responding. In other words, who can mute themselves as well as you can do? It's unbelievable what you put up with. This is what the Gemara is saying. God just sits there and he watches mankind abuse his creation and do the most immoral things and like right in his back of his face. It's unbelievable what he has to put up with. It's like a father who buys his son a brand new sports car and the son just like crashes into the garage and runs over the garbage can and just goes all over and then has joyride and has no appreciation whatsoever for the car that he was given as a gift. I mean, what father is not going to take it away? What father is not going to scream at the child and say, what are you doing? I didn't buy it for that reason. Not God. It's amazing. I mean, everything catches up. Listen, it's 5,783, and as bad as the world is today, as much evil that exists today, it's not nearly as evil as it could have been. Evil has not triumphed. It hasn't triumphed. It goes down. It has a period of time. It rises up. It can do damage, serious damage. Nothing that God didn't want or plan, but it can be the vehicle for that damage. But in the end, it's gone. Even Hitler, Yimach B'Zichro, he's not even buried in the ground. He burned himself. He had himself cremated. Right? He's dead, missing. He can't even go to a gravesite. Thank God. Because people would probably flock there, all the neo-Nazis. It's gone. The Nazi movement's gone. The Romans gone. And all the evil that ever existed eventually disappears. It's gone. It goes away because God does have his ways to equal things out. And of course, eventually Mashiach comes. It'll all be gone. It's all be gone. And all the evil will be gone too. But in the meantime, even over the course of history, while it's still here, good overall triumphs. But in the meantime, until that it does, so much evil is allowed to exist and to continue to do its damage and confuse people. That's the worst part of all. And one of the reasons why is because God stays quiet. Look, evil seems to be able to have its cake and eat it too. People can do things. You know, the story of the Gemara of Titus. Titus was Titus. And even according to his secular records, he died young from something of a brain disease. But the Gemara talks about a Hashkacha Pratis. Titus, before he became Caesar, he was the one who conquered the Beis Hamikdash, and he took all the different property, of the temple back to Rome as booty. Did terrible things in the Kodesh Kodeshim, really disgraceful, things. And then as he's going back to Rome, so the waters began to. And apparently he believed in God because he said, their God only defeats people, by the water. He defeated Pharaoh by the sea and others by the sea. You only fight on water. So God says, he says, God, fight me on dry land. Let's see if you can do that. So God says, be careful what you say. And God has a little bug go into his nose and grow in his head and cause him terrible pain. Eventually, he dies from it. He has his way of getting at the evil people of history. But in the meantime, there are people in this world who are righteous, tzaddikim, and they're such good people. The world needs them for the world to survive. And they die at the age of 36 or 24. And they have diseases, and they have sicknesses, and they have, and all kinds of hardships, and they're gone. And then you have people who are so bad, there might be a reason why they are this way, and that's between them and God. But in the meantime, from our perspective, they're just doing such evil things from a Torah perspective, from a God perspective. And they're 93 years of age and going strong. And they got billions of dollars to do whatever they seem to want to do. And it's like, God, come on, do something about these people. Get rid of them already. Why this guy, he's young and he's good and he's dying off and you haven't saved his life, and this person wants children, they haven't had children yet. This person, doesn't even want children. They have 10 children already. It's like how is this all fair? Elim. Right? You mean that God stays silent. It's another shir. It's another book. Right? Why divine providence has to work that way. But in the meantime, that is the problem. The people mistake God's patience for absence. At least that is the way it is meant to appear to mortals for the sake of bechir, for free choice. If every sin was punishable on the spot, no one would do them. If a person did an avera, a sin, and a lightning bolt came down and struck a person dead, or they got into a car accident right away, then a person would say, well, they just did the sin and that's why they got killed. So why would I want to? I might feel like sinning, I might be tempted to sin, but I'm not going to do it because I want to live to. That takes away from free will. So therefore, God mixes it up. There's times that people get it this way. The Gemara says in Kesuvas, a few places, in Hedron, right, that even though the Arba Mises Basin, the four forms of capital punishment, he didn't have just one, we had 4 forms of capital punishment, because each form of capital punishment was a way to rectify the person from the sin that they did, different ways of the soul to leave the body. So we had 4. One of them was called stoning, which was not what you think it is at first, at least, that instead a person was pushed off a 2-story platform, let's say, and they fell, and usually they fell to their death, and they didn't die right away. Then stone was put on top of them, and they died from that. And there was strangulation, there was burning, right, which is gruesome. I'm not going to do it right now. And then there was sayef, with a sword. And the Gemara says, but they can only be handed out by the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin had to decide the person was guilty of the punishment, and then the Sanhedrin could carry it out. But no Sanhedrin, we can't do it. So therefore, we haven't had, and the Gemara says it didn't happen very often anyhow. They always look for ways to get out of it. That if a death penalty occurred once in 70 years, the Gemara says was called a hanging jury, so to speak. And but that aside, the Gemara says that if a person was guilty of those punishments, even today, it still happens. But it doesn't happen, of course, through the Sanhedrin or the traditional way. Instead, a person who's guilty of the stoning penalty might fall off a roof and break their neck, God forbid, right? Or if a person, had to be, suffocated, then they would drown, or something would happen to them, or they can't breathe, or they choke to death on something. God has different ways of carrying these things out. So the divine providence is still there. It's always going on. Nothing really has changed from God's perspective. He's doing exactly what he's always been doing the entire time, all through history. So, but what's changed? The way he does it. How much he shows us of it. How much we're able to see his divine providence. So sometimes you can see it, or you think you see it pretty clearly, but you don't know for sure. And anybody who wants to can do so. And anyone who wants to rationalize not divine providence can do so. It all depends upon your perspective. And that confuses a lot of people. I mean, why do bad things happen to good people? That's the simple question. The way it is put. And the corollary is, why do good things happen to bad people? We don't mind good things happen to good people. We don't mind bad things happen to bad people. But those two between, that's what confuses everybody. Because divine justice, where is it? It's there. But just, God's doing it in ways that we can't always tell. And that is to make you think about it. That's to make you use your head to go looking for God. Because history, ever since we were booted out of Gan Eden and sent into exile for thousands of years. Even after we entered Israel, the exile was not over from Eden. Because we are in exile. So ever since that time, life has been one ongoing game, hide and go seek. God has hidden, and we're supposed to be seeking him. And you do that intellectually by stripping away the layers of sheker, stripping away the layers of confusion to get to the kernel truth. And once you get there, it really is there. Wow, that is an amazing thing. Anyhow, going forward, but to preserve free will and for a host of other Kabbalistic reasons, God restrained himself at certain points in history from the evil habit. The knowledgeable know why. Those who don't but trust God for the process pine for divine justice to prevail. It's Kabbalistic mostly. But, why did the Holocaust happen? Most people who ask that question, they don't have an answer. But let's let that slide and wait till the future when God will explain it. But I trust it was for the good. There are lots of people like that, but there are lots of people like that. A handful of people who actually explain these things in Torah terms. But people who don't want to believe mistake silent absence. Remember how they danced on the golden calf at the base of Mount Sinai and engaged in licentious behavior? It was only because no one stopped them at first when they acted without impunity. It's just very frustrating for most of us. We're stuck between those periods when, in the past, God found the boom, and the next time he will. We're the people who moved into the neighborhood while it was still safe and still live there after crime has moved in. And though some people may want to sell and move, the rest of us would rather fight for what we love. Let me specifically hear this, sure. But there are things to know that make it easier to cope. All of Mashiach is not an accident. This world of falsehood is not like it just evolved. Didn't see that coming. God says, I was actually planning to make an olam of truth, or will of truth, olam emes, but something went wrong in the calculations and the computer program, and somehow there's all distortion. No, it's all part. There's nothing going on today that wasn't planned from Ma'aseh Bereshis. Just that no one told us about it. Well, that's not true. Kabbalah did. It spoke about it in the most blatant terms, but people didn't learn it. People weren't taught it. It was considered to be off limits for the longest time for a lot of people. And so all of that, which is this is the way we think it should be, very black and white, right? But it's complicated, much more than that. So it says, it's still very hard to understand how a Holocaust could happen in a God-controlled world, but it did. Even if Israel was built upon the ashes of the 6 million plus who died, who says we can understand the truth of such a calculation? I mean, it's a fact. It's been said by many people that Eretz Israel is built upon the ashes of the Holocaust. But we weren't asked. We weren't shown the math to say that this is going to happen, so that could happen. And if you were to ask anybody, I think anyone reasonable, anybody logical, anyone with a sense of chesed, a sense of caring inside, of mercy, that was it worth it? Obviously, God felt it was. Why? We have to wait to find out. Those are already boundaries. We can't. That's what God told Moshe. Moshe asked these kinds of questions, and God said no. It's not possible to tell you the answer because the answer belongs to a realm of divine light and purpose that defies your existence. If I were to expose you to that light, you would die, and I still need you. As long as you're meant to live. Now, after you leave this world and you're no longer a body, and if you're not going to be back as a reincarnation, as a Gilgal, and God said that's not for you, then all of a sudden, without these limitations of the physical reality, you will become aware of all these answers. A lot of them based upon the level that you achieve in this world. It's not, you don't get everything. You only get what you deserve in the world to come. Part of the pleasure of the world to come is getting all this knowledge that you merited through learning and your mitzvah performance in this world. But you will certainly Even in the Messianic era, even in Mashiach, when the Yetzer Hara is gone and there's no longer any free will. So that even at that point in time, God will begin to reveal a lot of the answers to questions that until that time were closed off. Because this period of history, from the time that we were created until Mashiach finally comes, is for the development of one thing and one thing only: bitachon and emunah in God, trust and faith in God. The mitzvah, the Torah we learn, is to facilitate that. The mitzvahs we perform are to help with that. Yeah, they get you schar and what they get in, but at the end of the day, what God wants to see is how close you've come to Him. Because as our Machal, Moshe Chaim Tzata points out in Derech Hashem, right, that the ability to be with God forever in the world to come and have the insurmountable pleasure that you can't begin to imagine, no matter how much you enjoy yourself in this world, is based upon how much you're like Him. And that's what we're doing. We're shaping ourselves like Him. Ol Masheker is the farthest thing from that. Ol Masheker is being too human, is going too far down the physical path. It's allowing our instincts to guide us and to lead us and to make decisions for us, rather than our seichel, which is tied to the neshama, tied to the soul. And that's the test. And as history winds down, that's what God's doing. We're all just being tested. It's one big laboratory test going on right now, where God's saying, which direction are you going? In the direction of emes or the direction of sheker? And as the Gra points out, there's no neutral ground. There's no such thing as neutrality in this particular war. This is the war of all history. And you have to make a decision. You have to not just make a decision, but act on the decision. Not just let yourself avoid the whole thing and go about your own personal business. So, B'ezras Hashem, hopefully that by focusing on this and learning about this and talking about this, becoming more aware of it, we become stronger in that battle and are more capable of being able to pry ourselves away from the sheker and rise above it and move instead towards the emes. And during these 3 weeks, right now, in the 3 weeks that mourns the loss of the Beis Hamikdash, that's the whole focal point right now, is that we are reducing our pleasure in this physical world to remember there was once a Beis Hamikdash, and that's what the Beis Hamikdash really was. The Beis Hamikdash was the focal point of Olam HaEmes. With its destruction, we lost our connection to truth. It was such an anchor in terms of our connection to God and absolute truth. Without it, we're wandering. We're like people, splashing around the water trying to avoid drowning. So this is an important time to focus on this and work at it and get your priorities straight. Shabbat Shalom.